Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a disassembly for you of this little guy. This is the Three Rivers Manufacturing Nomad, which is an interesting little piece, I have to say, 100%. First off, though, let's go ahead and do a disassembly on it, just to get in there and see what's going on. So the screws here, we have T6, it looks like, holding on these scales. One thing that's of interest about this particular knife is that the scales are interchangeable. I have over here, just off the camera, a second set of scales. I'm going to leave the carbon fiber on because I prefer it slightly, but you can also buy other sets of scales and other materials. These are blue G10 and whatnot. So if you wanted to just swap the scales out, it's actually easy enough to do that. You have... On this side, it just lifts right off, and so I could just then plop this on here, and then screw, and then on this side, you actually have to loosen this, to get to this side, you have to loosen this pivot here, and then move the clip over and unscrew it in that way. So it's a little harder on that side, but still, they make it pretty straightforward. So I'm going to go ahead and put those there. And then on this side, actually, I will need to... do this, and then this becomes, I believe, a hex bit, which is weird that they're using hex on one side, or for one set of screws, and Torx for another. Is it the end of any worlds? No, not really, but it is certainly a thing. A little weird. And so I'll pop the pivot out on this side as well, keeping those screws separate up at the top here using a little set of screw dividers there. Now, what this will allow me to do is remove the clip entirely. So at that point in time, I can now just go ahead and unscrew the carbon fiber on the back here. And that'll let me pop these off. No problem. There we go. And there we go. And here we go. Case closed. Problem solved. We have the knife more or less disassembled. The final step is actually going to be to just pop this scale, lift this scale right off of here. So actually, before I do that, let me show you how this thing works, because that is an interesting element to this. When you've got the scales off, you can see that there is this kind of lock bar thing along the top. It's sort of a backstrappy thing. Then when I actually fold the thing, you can see that this lifts up a little bit, and so this is applying significant spring tension downwards. When I lock the knife up, it falls down into position. So the slip joint aspect of it depends on the pressure of this little guy up here, and then similarly it falls back down in there. It's got this little area, this bar that's riding along the top of it there. It's a neat little lock. I mean, it's not all that different at some level from a conventional slip joint in that it's got the back spring, which is applying pressure there, but it is different in that it's using this thing that's riding along the back of it. It's a neat system, I gotta say. So anyways, there you go. There's that. Now, once we've done that, there are a couple of things we can see. I'm going to go ahead and pop out this this pin here, which I have no idea what to call that pin, but it is a thing. But it is the pin that rides inside the backstrap there. Now what we're going to see is something very interesting. This is actually using a pivot bushing, much like the Chris Reeve knives Shabazz is. And some other knives, I don't want to completely, But anyways, it's using a pivot bushing, which is nice because it gives you a, it gives it a very nice feeling, honestly. I like very much the feeling of pivot bushing knives, and it allows them to use these bigger circumferential washers that go around the bushing. Makes disassembly, maybe a reassembly, a little bit trickier in some senses because you can pinch this little washer there, and that's not a great thing, but for the most part, I think that's a neat little touch, and it explains why the action on this guy, even though this is still very much breaking in, and even though it's got this bar, there's a bar around here, this bar sliding along the back of the knife, the action is pretty damn smooth, and I suspect it'll get way smoother over time, so I can't argue with that there. But anyways, so I'm just going to go ahead and clean off this here. Did I mention that this was loaned to me directly by Three Rivers? They're an interesting company, 100%. They make knives for a bunch of people as an OEM. They are also very, understandably, legally so, reluctant to say who all they make knives for. In some cases, it's explicit, but in many cases, it is very much not. So that's kind of an interesting situation there. But I get the impression that they have been responsible for a number of knives that you and I might know, just behind the scenes. So, anyways, they've got a long history of knife making. This is just a relatively new thing that they're trying to make knives of their own. I'm trying to, they're succeeding. I believe they have made a knife here, 100%. No matter how much I feel about it, and I'm not saying I feel negatively, they've made a knife. So anyways, I'm just cleaning this off. Just getting everything ready to go and ready to reassemble here. I'm going to go ahead and clean the pivot off a little bit here. Make sure I wipe down my washers as well. So the blade itself is actually spinning around this thing here, and this thing is held captive by the scales, by the pivot screw tension, basically. So that gives it a slightly different feeling to it. And then here we go, clean this guy off here. I believe we are now good to go and all set and ready. So, excellent. Let's go ahead and put this little guy back together here. Where the heck is the... Oh, here it is. This is an important little element here, this backspacer. When I first did a disassembly of this live on Instagram, this backspacer flew off in that direction at some point. I didn't notice it. And so I was trying to figure out, wait, how the heck does this knife go back together? It should have a spacer or something there, but it's not on the table. And I look over there, and it's by my freaking laundry hamper. Okay. But the knife went back together way better once I had that in place. So, back at the ranch, let's go ahead and start the reassembly process here. So, we're going to go ahead and... Did I clean the pivot off? Yeah, I did. Go ahead and put a little lubrication on the pivot here. This is not a spinning part necessarily because of that pivot bushing, but the lube will actually help me to seat it in there. And why not, right? Next thing, we'll drop on the pivot bushing here. Next thing, we're going to drop in this little pin, which is the thing that slides along the back of the blade as we're doing it. And then we're going to drop on this washer. So the washer here, actually, let me put some lubrication on the outside of this little guy here. And then I'll put a little bit on the... There we go. Beautiful. This might actually, come to think of it, this knife is a knife that might actually run a little bit better on a heavy grease. That tends to be the case for the Shabazz and other bushing knives, and it's not like it's ever going to have a, crazy drop-shotty action because, well, it's a slip joint running on this odd system. But anyways, there you go. So next step here is going to get the, I have two goals here. First is to keep this bushing in its position against the back of the scale here. Because what I don't want to have happen is for this washer down here to slide over in this direction and get trapped underneath the bushing. At which point I'll have to take the knife back apart and it's not going to be great. But the other thing I need to do is apply the force required basically to get this pin get this spring under tension again. And so I'm going to use the blade itself very carefully and kind of use it to apply that upwards force here. There we go. And so just using my thumb, I was able to lift that just a little bit up, and that gave me the opportunity to drop everything into place. Now I'm going to look very carefully, and I'm going to make sure that my washer is centered. And indeed it still is, which means that my bushing is in position still, which is great. Then finally... It's also worth noting that doing this bushing system requires a little bit tighter tolerance than some. So, yeah, that's something respectable there. Okay, what else am I forgetting here? There is no detent ball, therefore there is no detent path to lube. What I am going to go ahead and do, and I could do this afterwards, but I'll do it now while it's open, is I'm going to use a thicker weight nano oil. This is the 85 weight stuff. I'm just going to apply a little bit to the back of the back of the tang here. And that'll just mean that as this moves along the back here, as it slides, it'll be lubricated rather than just metal on metal contact. So now I have to drop the... I need to get this in such a way that the pin is in position, then pull it down such that the pivot drops into place. Beautiful. Now I make sure that this pin is aligned on both sides, and indeed it is, which is good. I make sure that the backspacer is in position, which is also an important thing. Then I need to figure out which side the clip is going on. This is going into my pocket. It is going to then be on this side. This little spacer over here, I didn't point this out, but there's this little piece in the corner here, and this is actually somewhat adjustable. I can grab it I can grab it and move it either further in or further back out. And this is designed actually to keep the pocket material from going over the top of the this thing. It's a little barrier to keep your pocket from going in there. I am not going to win any awards for clear speaking here in the today, but that's okay. Luckily, I don't need to. I need a spudger of some variety. Come here. You will do. And just kind of pop that through there. So what I've done here is I've moved the pocket clip such that it is properly positioned and this side. If you want to make this, if you want to switch this around, then you'll just swap these two pieces. You'll move this over to here and then you'll flip the clip around, move it over to there. Nice little arrangement and makes for a nice deep carry. Nice overall. Okay, next step here is going to be to apply the, put in this screw over here. That's the wrong bit. So I will use this screw, a little bit of blue Loctite here. That was way too much blue Loctite here. That's a little bit of blue Loctite here. And just drop it in there, you little bugger. Slid out through the other side. Hopefully we're going to engage the threads with it. Nope. So what I have to do is use this little guy to provide some counter pressure. Now it'll engage the threads and pinch down together. I'm going to leave that reasonably loose right now for the moment because I don't need to crank it down. Then what we'll do is put the pivot in position here. Before I do that, I'm going to check one more time that that all of my bushing, that the washers are in proper alignment. So I'll just put that in there so it's not going to go anywhere. But I'm putting very, very light tension on this. I'm just going to look down in there and see. Yes, everything is in proper alignment in there. Just looking through the little slits to make sure that my washers are centered as they should be. Everything's working nicely. Blade is centered, so again, this is implying that I'm in the right situation. But okay, so I'll tighten the pivot down a little bit further. Next step is going to be to slightly loosen this back here such that I can move the clip out of the way in order to install the carbon fiber on the back side. There's probably a more graceful way to go about doing what I've just done. In fact, I can guarantee you that, because pretty much everything I do, there is a more graceful way to do it than the way in which I have done it. That's just the fact of being Nick Shabazz, it appears. So, okay, here's my little pry bar. This is a Rat Bastard Tools Enigma that I'm just using right here. Come on, you little bugger. Okay, so I've dropped that through there. That's now in position. Now what I need to do is screw in these little bits down here. Screw that in. And screw this in. This will keep the carbon fiber adhered. I like this carbon fiber a lot, actually. Now that lets me drop this in there. I could actually go ahead and, I should actually go ahead while I have the driver in. Again, not an efficient man. Drop in these other two screws here, which will keep the carbon fiber nicely attached. Oh, come off it, you little bugger. There we are. Not a very deep head on these T6s here. T6 is never a beautiful thing, although it's understandable given the size of these screws. But the head on this is particularly shallow, which makes it slightly frightening, especially if your T6 driver is at all worn. There we go. Okay. Freaking beautiful. Alrighty. Let's go ahead and then do my final tightening, where I'll tighten the back side here. That is in position here, so you can see it's preventing the pocket from going up further. Tighten this down a little bit. Nice. And we'll tighten the pivot. In this knife, no blade play, beautiful. The action is more determined by this sliding along the top here. You can actually see there's kind of a reflectivity in one area where the little bar has worn away some of the finish, the stonewash sort of thing on the top there. And so this will absolutely smooth out over time, but it's not like you're going to get a drop shot of action on this guy at any point. It's meant to be a very strong slip jointy sort of thing. And so, yeah, but anyways, there you go. That's your disassembly maintenance on your Three Rivers knives, Three Rivers Manufacturing, I suppose, Nomad. And keep an eye out for a review of this guy once I've actually carried it and know what to say about it. Hope this has been interesting to you, and have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.